And we begin today's show in Greece, where Athens has managed to squeeze some wriggle room from the mountain of debt it owes to its neighbors. Eurozone finance ministers approved a 4-month bailout extension on Tuesday, though it comes with strings attached. The German parliament has just given the green light to the deal with an overwhelming majority, but on the streets of Athens, there's fierce opposition.
Bailout backlash. Dozens of anti-establishment protesters clashed with Greek riot police yesterday. It's the first such rally since the leftist Syriza party took power a month ago. They're angry the country's new leader has agreed to a bailout extension with European lenders.
Yesterday we won a battle but not the war. The difficulty is not just those regarding the negotiations and our relations with our partners, but the real difficulties. They are ahead of us.
Tsipras had to make a few controversial concessions to get the extension over the line, pledging to continue the sale of state assets to free up capital, deeply unpopular with leftists, delay wage hikes and reduced corruption. The country's European creditors have rubber-stamped the agreement. Now member states' parliaments must give the final sign-off. The largest creditor of Greece's $240 billion bailout, Germany, today voted in favour of throwing Athens a lifeline, despite the move being unpopular with voters.
We have to bring Greece into a situation that finance markets can trust them again, and that Greece can act without any support on its own again. It's called competitiveness, and for Greece there's a longer road to go than for any other European country.
Germany is reluctantly agreeing to the deal. Others say there's simply no other choice.
We have to help Greece to stay in the EU, in the Eurozone. It can't be any other way. It is its place.
Inside Greece, there's some resentment from the far left towards the new government for going back on a promise of ending austerity measures. Others see compromise as a reality.
It's not a victory for the government, it's a victory for the country and for the people. Where would we go? We know there are conditions to getting funding.
The deal allows Greece to tiptoe the edge of bankruptcy a little while longer. Negotiators from both sides have until June to decide whether Athens needs a new bailout program to stay afloat. This is merely a band-aid solution, and the real negotiations are only just getting started.
For more on the ever-developing story about the economy inside Europe and beyond, we are joined here in the studio by Mr. Xiang Zongzuo here in Beijing, Chief Economist at the Agricultural Bank of China, or ABC. Meanwhile, joining us here in Beijing, Mr. Enter Tangen. He is CCTV's current affairs commentator. And also from Athens, we have Mr. Konstantin Mikalos, who is the president of the Athens Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Gentlemen, welcome to our program. First of all, Mr. Mikalos, congratulations. You've got 4 months or 4 more months of breathing room in Greece. Your reaction to the recent approval by the German parliament?
Well, this is effectively Greece secured a 4-month extension of the loan agreement, not the bailout agreement, because that is officially completed as far as the Greek government is concerned. And therefore, I think that the calm that has returned overall in the European markets, and the fact that the so-called Grexit term is not reproduced by the mass media around the world, is a positive sign that discussions are continuing so that we find the golden solution to the problem that Greece has.
Well, Mr. Mikalos, may I just follow up a little bit? The most important question is whether your government is going to bring this specific plan to your parliament, because at this moment it is still not known, and also whether your parliament and your government, once agree on this, will implement what has been promised 4 months from now. So what is your judgment, briefly?
Well, first of all, I need to say that the market and the economy, the real economy, can't wait for 4 months. The liquidity crunch is extremely apparent within the Greek economy. We need solutions, and we need them now. So primarily the Greek government, I think, has to bring the economic plan which it will propose to the European Union for action immediately. And I'm sure that the parties, the political parties of opposition will support this plan as long as this plan is directed towards the real economy's problems. And the sooner the better, because as I said, there is a tremendous liquidity crunch at the moment, and we need desperately to have constructive reforms within our Greek economy.
Absolutely. And here in the studio, Professor Xiang with us. Professor, there is already talk about the so-called third bailout. Back in 2010, Greece already got 110 billion euro, and then followed by 240. This is the second, which is going on right now. And people are talking about a third one. Do you think there's possibility of a third one?
Definitely there will be third one, even fourth one, fifth one. So it's a real...
That's a big statement you're making,
I'm
sir.
very pessimistic about the solution of Greece debt problem. The extension of 4 months is just space of breathing time. It's not a solution of a problem. It's too short. 4 months is too short to implement the promised reforming measures. Greece needs longer term, even 4 years, to implement the promised policies, the physical reform, employment, opening markets, taxation system, reshaping. All these measures are very difficult. And 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, the Greece government promised to do that. But now they ask desperately for extension of bailout.
So you're saying there's only a breathing room. In fact, nothing will be done.
Nothing will be done.
Significantly.
Definitely,
Mr. Tangen.
I'm going to agree. I think you have to liken Greece as to a person who's drowning in the water, and the EU is saying, you need to learn to swim. It's not that point. The problem here is very simple. People have to understand that they overspent their credit cards and they have no way of paying it back. The idea that they can take 4.5% of their GDP, which has gone down by 25% since the EU crisis, just isn't possible. There's going to be it's probably going to end up in a Greek exit. And the reason I say that isn't because everybody wants it. Everyone would love to see a solution. The difficulty here is the democratic system itself. No one in Greece, they feel that they've had enough pain. They just want to move on, but you can't do that.
Mr. Mikolos, you need to react here. We got two gentlemen here in the Beijing studio. Both of them are not at all optimistic about what's going on in your country. Your democracy, first of all, and secondly, the reality of the economy. Sir, respond, please.
First of all, I think that the new Greek Prime Minister, Mr. Tsipras, made a turn towards reality almost as soon as he was elected, because we need to look very briefly at the rhetoric during the pre-election period. I remind you that there were heavy discussions about putting forward to our European partners a major haircut of the 240 billion debt. That never surfaced on any dialogue table. Secondly, we were talking about an extension of the current loan agreement by 30 or 50 years. This has still remained undiscussed, and I think this will be the case for a lengthy period of time. So what we need to face at the moment...
Go ahead, sir. Let's have Mr. Mikolos to finish his sentence, and then we'll come back to you. Mr. Mikolos, please finish your point.
Yes. Okay. So what we essentially need to address at the moment is a humanitarian crisis within Greece as a result of the deep austerity measures that have been imposed over the last 5 years.
You say humanitarian. You say humanitarian, but others disagree. They think this is not humanitarian. It's rather the ills that you really need to cure of your system. Mr. Xiang and then Mr. Tangen.
I'd like to make 2 points. For democratic leaders, the promise is one thing. Implementing promised measures is another one. Many cases, the leaders promised so many things before elected. After elected, usually they cannot make up to their promises. The second, much more important, I wonder how can Greece government manage 2 sides of one thing. First of all, they need definitely money to pay everything, to stimulate their economy. On the other hand, they must implement so-called austerity plan, physical measures, taxation
so
measures.
You think there's no answer to it?
How can they manage in a delicate balance of the two sides of things?
Is it a question mark or is it an exhilaration mark? You're saying, Mr. Tangen.
I have to agree with my colleague. Look, you have a country with 25% unemployment, 50% unemployment in young people. This idea that you can make promises and then break them after you get elected is fine, except this is why this government is in power, because the last government wasn't able to deliver. So this government will fall. Already there's controversy within his party, people who feel that he has betrayed exactly what we said, the promises that were made. So the democratic process is going to work against this, and that's why I forecast a Greek exit.
Mr. Mikalos, respond to that, and plus the fact that there's already complaints within the Syriza party about too many compromises, quote unquote, this current government making to the EU as a result of the voting in the German parliament. Tell us, what exactly is the government going to do? It has to do so many things all at the same time, and these are going one against another.
I agree with you that there is a serious discussion taking place internally within the government Syriza party at the moment. But we need to clarify that the pre-election promises that were made to the Greek electorate have a 4-year time span within which they need to be implemented. So at the moment, they realize, the new government realizes that there is important business ahead of us as far as our European partners and lenders are concerned, and they will have to make quite a few concessions. However, we need to protect, as I said earlier on, the section that refers to the humanitarian crisis is of paramount importance, and I think that our European partners have fully understood that. However, we need to look at important issues on tax evasion, which we agree with the government, and of course the illegal trading, which is of paramount importance, and we have almost 6 billion euros loss in terms of public revenues on an annual basis. So we need to combat this phenomenon, and of course we need to reactivate the privatization scheme, because I think that is of paramount importance at the moment, not just for Greece in terms of incoming funds, but also in terms of the credibility that the Greek state needs abroad.
I see. There's a huge task list over there. Of course, that's only coming from your business perspective. Other social groups inside your country have different views also about what are the priorities. Having said that, though, we need to set our eyes not just in Greece, not just on the European continent, but also what's going on elsewhere in the world and how the story inside Europe about Athens really influencing everybody. Inside the United States, Mr. Tangen, the GDP number just come out today. It's 2.2% growth compared to the last quarter, third quarter of last year, which is 2.6%. And the Federal Reserve say no interest rates changes unless the economy is really picking up. So what does that mean?
Well, it certainly gives Janet Yellen more ammunition to say that there's a go slow that's going forward here. I mean, last quarter, people were talking about a 4% economy. Now things have came down, and we're not even close to a 3% economy. So there's going to be questions as we go forward. There were lackluster performance. You had some increases in durable orders and things like that, but the CPI was down. There's concern about inflation. So it's a little bit unknown. Hopefully, though, the U.S. will come into line. The unemployment numbers were pretty good, and this will help buoy a very, very troubled world.
Professor Xiang, your views here. People are saying U.S. economy once again become the engine of the world. Is it really?
Yes, it is. But the recovering and increasing pace of U.S. economy is not up to the very optimistic expectations of investors or observers. But I do think U.S. economy will keep the pace of recovery this year and next years. However, because of slowing down of Eurozone and other emerging markets, and which of course will have negative impacts on U.S. exports or as well as other kinds of consumption, for example, the foreign tourism. So in this way, so U.S. economy cannot so-called decouple with other
what's going on in the rest of the world. So, and let's talk about the rest of the world once again. China. Deflation has become a concern in this country. We see the central government has been trying to in a way, change some fiscal policies and monetary policies in order to adjust to that? For example, in the real estate sector, will that be able to change the picture?
Well, there's two sides of Chinese economy. On the supply side, there is overcapacity for many sectors, particularly for manufacturing sectors. So there's no space for these sectors to increase their investments. On the consumption side, consumption quite good, but still weak compared with our expectations. So in this sense, joined together, I do think Chinese economy this year and the near future will keep weakening. This means slowing down of growth rates. But it will remain about 7%, which is quite good. But 7% growth rates will create many problems for investors as well as for many employees in these sectors.
Is that the price that China has to pay for the so-called restructuring of the economy or structural reform?
Well, I take a different perspective on this in the sense that I think China is doing what's necessary at this point. I mean, it's the worst time in the during a slowing economy to be restructuring. But unless they start taking the steam out of the housing market and overcapacity and deleveraging these industries, you're going to be in a worse off position in the future.
Right.
This pain now will lead to gain later.
And finally, we go back to Mr. Mikolos. You see, sir, whether it's United States, whether it's China, or elsewhere in the world, everybody is doing the restructuring. Everybody knows the pains of restructuring. So does your country, probably even more. What is your sense of how much can be done, sir? Final words from you before we wrap up.
Well, I think that the global economy is at a very fragile state at the moment, and any hike in the U.S. interest rates, I think, will have negative consequences for the U.S. economy. And since you touched on the Chinese economy and the prospects for 2015, once again, it's a correlation of what happens generally on the global level. So we need to be extremely attentive, and I would just like to refer very briefly to what a very experienced banker, former banker, Mr. Alan Greenspan, spoke of just a couple of days ago.
All right.
Mr. Greenspan's experience is vast, and I think that we should take extremely seriously and note the points that he raised concerning these issues.
Absolutely. Mr. Xiang, final words from you.
Yes, we need more restructuring measures to implement, particularly for China. We need restructuring our economy in order to sustain in the future.
That also takes courage, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. Courage is what we need. At this moment, we still need to have confidence in order to have courage. And thank you so much for being with us. We have Konstantin Mikolos joining us from Athens here in Beijing, Mr. Xiang Zongzuo, and Mr. Einar Tangen. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us.